Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It's Friday, January 9th, 2026, and this is the fourth in our occasional series on thoughts and reflections. So as a social scientist by training, I study the external forces and cultural influences and so on that help shape human behavior. It's an endlessly fascinating subject matter to examine cause and effect in the human world, despite the limitations in our studies. And we can rarely establish definitive causal relationships like we often find in nature, but instead we talk about probabilities and possibilities and the likelihood of different outcomes. As with nature in general, including the climate, including weather, we really only have so much control over the various outcomes. You can strive to be the head of your nation or wildly famous or a renowned professional athlete or musician, artist, etc. But even if you're the hardest working, most determined person around, the chances of reaching the very top in any field are quite slim. So much just has to go right. You have to have some lucky breaks along the way, the classic being in the right place at the right time, and much more. In terms of more modest goals, we know these are a lot more attainable. Finding a partner, having a family, finishing your studies in a specific field, getting a job you like, owning your own home. So most of us can do these types of things. But even then, you have to have a little bit of luck. You have to have some abilities, some personality traits, as well as the right social supports and connections and opportunities, which begs the question, okay, Dr. J, if there's so much of our lives that's contingent upon other people, conditions, and circumstances, well then, what exactly can we as individuals actually control? Well, perhaps the main thing would be our attitudes. And even that, of course, our attitudes are going to be shaped by our language, by our upbringings, by our experiences, and so on. But yet, while there's much we absolutely cannot change in the world, or at least not immediately, including, I would even argue, our core personalities, we can change our attitudes, our immediate responses to the world. In fact, we do that all the time on a small-scale basis. So, for example, we might be upset that someone's late to work or in terms of picking us up. And our attitude might be that they're irresponsible, they're being inconsiderate, something else. And then we learn the reason perhaps why they were late. And our attitude and response can change almost instantaneously. Oh, they were in a big accident, or they were stuck behind a slow-running train, or they had to rush a very sick child to the hospital, or 1,000 other things. So in short, we often create much more drama in our minds than what's actually happening in the world around us, or we're inventing stories that we tell ourselves about situations. And again, these are often fictions. Now, don't misunderstand me. Obviously, big things do happen, sometimes with, immeasurable consequences. Devastating hurricanes do sometimes hit land. And, once in a while, we might be in a very serious car accident or catch a serious flu or COVID-19, or, God forbid, somebody pointing a gun in our faces. And people really do find themselves, some people do, struggling to eat on a regular basis or having access to clean and healthy water. So, in other words, sometimes the real life or material conditions and circumstances directly affect our safety, our health, our well-being. We have to respond in real time then to these more challenging situations or conditions. But what about for most people, our everyday lives? We might get into an argument or be upset with someone for what they've said or done, or vice versa. And as I mentioned just recently, there are times when perhaps we face the greatest of challenges in our own personal lives, maybe wondering if we could ever even manage or handle the stress or even survive. And yet, obviously, we did. And you did, because you're here watching or listening to this vlog. So whatever's happened in the past, you've managed to survive and perhaps even to thrive. Because of the worst times, and even despite the worst of the times and circumstances that we might have encountered, 99.9% of us usually do realize that these pass, these circumstances, these challenges, and often very quickly. We know that things will change. And in our heart of hearts, we almost always know that they're going to improve, arguably get better, at least compared to our lowest points. Not perfect necessarily, but at least better. Many things do, in fact, get resolved rather quickly and quite well, but not everything. So at some point in our lives, we've come to terms with the fact, or we have to come to terms with the fact, that it's a fool's errand to expect that everything's going to be resolved perfectly and that we're going to live a life free of stress and worry. But here's the key point. The thing we have the most control over, as the Stoics taught us, is how we respond to our circumstances, to the information at hand. Do you treat or do you view your relationships, your life in general? Do you think of your job, your circumstances, whatever, as a constant battle? If you do so, then you probably almost invariably are inviting suffering into your own life. You're going to create pain based on how you view the situation, or by giving in, at least temporarily, to certain emotions that create or reinforce certain kinds of pain in your life. So in other words, you respond, for example, to situations that you don't like, maybe with sadness or anxiety or frustration or fear or anger. Now, to some extent, of course, these are natural reactions and emotions. But my point is to what extent are you allowing yourself then to create suffering in your own life? Worst of all, most times the dramas that we create aren't actually real in a material sense, but rather just our thoughts and our interpretations, our projections, these different scenarios, if you will. And these scenarios largely only exist in our imaginations, what we think might happen or might be the negative outcome that we don't want or that we fear. And in the extreme, of course, some people truly catastrophize things. They create whole scripts and futures that never arrive. It's the what if syndrome run amok. That's what I call it. What if I don't get an A on the paper? What if I don't get the job? What if I don't complete my studies? What if I have cancer? What if she doesn't love me? Or even, what if I'm just basically an unlovable person? Now, the great Stoic Seneca observed that we suffer much more in our imaginations than we do in reality. And hence, that's the thing, again, over which we have the most control. We don't have to think negative thoughts or be pessimistic, even if we've somehow been taught or programmed that way throughout our lives. We can change. So here's a very simple real-life example, what I'm talking about, and how we can respond to the situation, and perhaps learn how to respond differently. So we had a recent reno done on our house. We love it, but there was a wrinkle, there's a problem with some of the wiring, and some of the outlets weren't working properly. So we have home coverage in general. I called the company. They sent out a technician to diagnose and ideally fix the problem. Nice young man came out, had a strong sense of what had happened, but he couldn't definitively identify it and fix it on that particular call. So he suggested he come back with a second technician, set up a new appointment, etc. Two-person job, no problem. So we set the time and the date. They set the block of time, I should say, really, and the date the following week. And I arranged to stay home from work on that morning. But then I got a text indicating that the technician wouldn't be coming, that had been canceled. And now it's a larger company, so I initially was a bit perturbed, and I asked, why couldn't they just get somebody else to come with them? Well, that's, in effect, as was explained to me, this is all dealt with or handled by the head office, and I expressed my initial concerns and frustrations because I'd planned my whole morning around that original appointment. But then I realized, of course, very quickly, well, that's completely beyond my control at this point, right? So what's the use in continuing to be concerned or even upset about it? I wasn't that upset, but I was a little bit perturbed. It'd been nice to have had the technician there to resolve the problem that day, but it didn't happen. So my point is why waste additional energy and time just being frustrated over the circumstances? And so I accepted the substitute booking that we figured out and figured, okay, great, we'll just do it a different day. And so what happened? Well, I got a text the morning of the second appointment, basically the same information, same explanation. But this time I really didn't worry at all about what happened. I planned my work and what I'd be doing that morning, regardless of whether or not the technicians came. And of course, they were extremely apologetic and booked a third appointment. And that one I only gave about 10 seconds of thought to, because I thought a couple of things. First of all, the poor guy that felt terrible now having canceled twice. And then, the old adage, third time's a charm, right? So anyway, I got the text en route for that third appointment. The technician was on the way, and I thought, great. But then the guy texted me personally, okay? And here's part of what he wrote. I actually have the text here, so let me call that up real quick. He goes, well, we booked an electrical call for this morning. I've been trying my best to get the right people to take care of the backfeeding neutral problem. The problem is that I'm not the boss, and my crew is all over the region. I had every intention of you being first, but the other electrician that has the equipment to trace your line has called in sick. I can't trace the circuit by myself, so I have to reschedule you for Friday. If you want to call me and yell, I totally understand. My boss is aware of the situation, and I can give you his number too. I'm really sorry about all this crap. And text. So, okay. Yeah. But my response was, nope, no yelling. Friday it is. And then I said, well, just one small favor in light of the 3 straight cancellations. Would you mind subscribing to my YouTube channel or blog series? Which he did. Okay, so I planned my normal Friday, which is today, January 9th, bearing in mind that the 2 electricians were scheduled to come, but I was fully prepared no matter what happened. And so guess what happened? They came. And so everything worked out fine, okay? They mentioned, or the main guy mentioned just that first hour would be free, but since they didn't create the initial problem, if they couldn't resolve it and they had to keep working, the second or third hour beyond that would be $250 an hour, right? And so I said, I chuckled. I said, I understand, but if you don't mind, can you guys just aim to get this done in an hour? Because that'll save me some big bucks. All right, so then I left at 9 o'clock. I got a call at 9:57 a.m., just under an hour. Guy said, sorry, am I bothering? I said, not at all. He said, well, as it turns out, it was exactly what I thought the problem was, and we were able to fix it. I thought, great, no problem. And all in under an hour. So in the end, things worked out beautifully. It would have been great, obviously, to have them there the first day, the first appointment, or the second or the third, but that's not what happened. So in my estimation, I spent about 15, maybe as much as 20 minutes worrying about the first appointment, texting, replanning, and so on. And then just maybe 3 or 4 minutes in response to the second appointment. And then for the last appointment, not more than just a few seconds. Okay. So in total, I spent less than maybe 20 minutes or so worrying about the missed appointments, the 3 of them. And then, obviously I had to plan for the 4th one. And I had the occasional negative thought, especially after the first missed appointment. But the total time I spent actually worrying or fretting about the situation was just a matter of a few minutes. So imagine if I got really upset, though. And that certainly could have happened. And what if I'd gotten more upset with each additional missed appointment, right? This whole sense of the building frustration. And then for that matter, obviously I could have called the company, talked to a manager, supervisor, what have you. They almost certainly would have been apologetic. But on the other hand, what would be the point? What would have changed? So on the one hand, that literally would have just been more time that I would have wasted or spent, talking to the company, talking to them about their problems and the inefficiencies and how much they inconvenienced me and so on and so forth. And so I could have gotten plenty upset about the whole situation. But on the other hand, that wouldn't have really changed anything. And sure, I could have complained, maybe that would have helped them improve their service, but I don't think so. I mean, if I can offer constructive feedback on occasion, I certainly will. But they know they screwed up. And they know if they do that enough, they're obviously going to lose their customers. So I don't need to remind them of that. And if I'd been really upset, I could have canceled my contract as well. But you know what? I've been with the company for many years. I actually always quite liked them. Yeah, they screwed up this time. But they've never done it before. And, I like the guys that did the work. And everything works great. So On my end, the only thing I would have changed maybe would have been that first 5 to 10, maybe up to 15 minutes that I actually wasted even being upset. Okay? But then I think, wow, compared to what, like 20 years ago, I would have been apoplectic. I would have been way more upset and wasted far more time and energy. So this is the point then. Make the intention in your life to let as much go as possible. Let go of the dramas, the imagined outcomes in your mind that are weighing you down. Waste as little of your time and energy worrying about the woulda, shoulda, coulda, what might have been. And if you can do that, you're going to find yourself in a much better space and place on a regular day in, day out basis. Okay? Again, let go as much as possible of the dramas, the imagined futures or outcomes in your mind that are upsetting, and waste as little of your time and energy worrying about why people didn't show up, why things didn't work out exactly as you'd hope, why the world itself isn't behaving as the way you would like it to behave. And instead, think about how much more you'll be able to do with all that extra time and energy now at your disposal, all that you've saved by not getting upset and worrying about things that you can't control. And that's, again, where you have some real choice. So choose wisely. Take charge to the extent that you can of your thoughts and your emotions, and redirect them in the creative or constructive or life-affirming ways that you most value. That's where you should be spending your time and energy. Are you going to get upset once in a while? Of course, as do I. But I can tell you, if you work at this, you get upset less and less over time. And guess what? I'm way healthier, certainly mentally, and dare I say more productive in many respects in my mid-60s than I've ever been in my life. So it's worth it. All right, as ever, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, dole out hugs in abundance, and redirect that energy to the stuff that you care most about. All right, and we'll see you soon, if not next week. Take care.